If you are in a situationship, we see you. You're getting needs met, you're having fun, and that's totally okay. The only thing from my perspective that's not okay is you not knowing when a situationship becomes damaging to you. That is what we're not okay with.
It's not about whether it's good or bad, but it's about the impact that it's having on you and whether or not the choices you're making are conscious or by default. Hey, everybody, it's Bianca.
Welcome back, Evolvers. It's Emilia.
If you clicked on this episode, welcome. You are probably either in a situationship or you're maybe considering getting into one, but you're not super certain, or you have someone in your life that is in one and you want to know how to help them. You want to know how to be there for them because you can probably see what they can't, that it's harmful, it's not serving them, it might even be very destructive. So, what we're going to do in this episode and what you guys are going to walk away with are how to understand if it's helping you or not, if it's serving you or not, when and how to walk away, and how to make effective decisions when you are going into these situations so that number one, you can stay safe, which is the number one priority. And so that number two, you are making conscious decisions that are actually helping you to get your needs met. So I'm going to pick Emilia's brain on this. Emilia is an expert when it comes to relationships, and this is her, like, relationships and how they work and how they function are 100% her area of expertise. So, and she studied this her whole life. So I'm going to pick your brain on this, Emilia, and we're going to do the very best that we can to, help our listeners get everything that they need so that they can feel certain and grounded. So, how would you define a situationship? Let's start there. Let's just start with a shared language.
Basic definition. Yeah, love it. And I love that we do that here at Evolve because it puts everyone on the same page. So a situationship is not a relationship, but it's also not a friendship. So what's the difference between a situationship and a relationship? So a situationship is a relationship. It's not necessarily an intimate only relationship, but for lack of better words, it's a romantic relationship without the quote unquote formalities of romance. It's usually just something like a relationship that lacks a label. A label other than situationship, right? So you're engaging in these romantic, quote unquote, or maybe just physical or sexual or intimate, maybe even emotional exchanges without any interest, discussion, or intent for labeling, for commitment, for the formalities that actual relationships, committed relationships define and structure so that not only are both needs met between two or more people, but a situationship benefits and thrives in the ambiguity, the lack of labels, the lack of structure, the lack of formalities, for lack of better words.
What would lead someone to get into a situationship, and what are some misconceptions around it?
It's a great question. So what would lead someone into a situationship is someone who is in this quote unquote, and I think it's really important to mention this, they're not in a committal phase of their life. So someone, right, like all of us as human beings, we have needs for connection, for camaraderie, for emotional attunement, for safety, for feeling a sense of community and love and belonging with other human beings. And someone who is in a stage in their life where they don't feel as though that they have capacity to, and this is an interesting nuance here, feel as though they have capacity, right? But they're not in a term in their life or a phase or a chapter in their life where they are in a commitment level of their world or their chapter, their life, to where they can consistently meet the needs of their partner, and to where they can quote unquote overgive, or not overgive, where they can give beyond the quote unquote confines of a exchange of the quote unquote bare minimum. So, for example, someone who is, let's say, for example, had been in some relationships here and there, but then all of a sudden they learned about the fact that they have extremely avoidant tendencies. And let's say they are going to therapy and wanting to work on their avoidant attachment style. They might go or enter into a situationship to get some of those more sexual or emotional or physical needs met. And so long as that is a explicitly communicated agreement and arrangement, and there aren't overrides to the boundaries of that, that might be something that benefits that person. Now, whether or not it benefits someone on the other end because they might be screwing with the quote unquote lines and the boundaries, it really does boil down to that commitment level. And in formal, structured, labeled, if you will, consistent relationships, a lack of committal is a big problem. So what are some of the big common myths? You asked about situationships. Go ahead.
Before we even dive into that, do you think it's actually possible for someone to be in a situationship without developing feelings? Like, I feel like that's bullshit. I feel like that's such bullshit. Question. How can you spend, unless you are severely avoidant and emotionally stunted, how can you be around someone and spend time with someone and have sex with someone or share parts of your life with someone and not develop feelings? It is literally impossible based on the mechanisms of our brain. You literally cannot not develop feelings because you're having mirror neurons firing off and you're pair bonding with this person. You might not be slapping a label on it, but okay, yeah. I'm gonna pause and we'll keep going because I could go on a freaking rant about this.
I can too, and this has been really interesting because I've heard from a lot of people that situationships are beneficial, but it really only ends up becoming beneficial in the short term, right? It's beneficial if two people are in that quote unquote non-committal phase. They both agree to that and they admit that their long-term goal is to be in a long-term relationship. They don't want to be in a situationship forever. And as a matter of fact, they have very accountable lines in the sand to where the engagement is going to be over. So I actually have met and worked with people who are more in that quote unquote traveling phase of their life where they're not planted, they're not grounded in any sort of consistency. And because of their job, them kind of going around to different countries and different areas in their world ends up kind of in this space where not only can they not commit to anything more than a situationship that they kind of frequent when they're in that geographical location, but it would actually be extremely difficult considering their careers to actually engage in a more formalized relationship. Now,
that's very different though, because there's a clear beginning and there's a clear end. There's this understanding that this is only going to be for a short period of time. I am going to be in town for X number of days or X number of weeks. And I want to spend this time with you with the real, valid, mutual understanding that I am literally leaving. But most people do not enter situationships with that type of mutually agreed upon contract.
Correct. And that's where the situationship gets a bad rep, right? Because again, I think it can be helpful for exploratory experiences. And to your point, one of the things that is a big myth about situationships is that they always end in heartbreak. That's not always the case. One of the biggest myths that I've also heard about situationships is that if you quote unquote keep things as friends, you won't develop feelings. That's such a myth, because what you mentioned, the pair bonding, that is something that if you are consistently not putting any labels or no structures, no formalities, no long-term kind of roadmap in the mix, but it's just this short term, you're literally syncing each other's central nervous systems up to this short term dopamine addict type experience. And when there's the exchanges of usually whatever is agreed upon in a situationship, it is directly in I don't want to say in paradox or in contrast, but it's preventing you from getting direct other needs met. And there's only so long that becomes you like have essentially this quote unquote shielding part of you that pretends like you don't have feelings, or compartmentalizes the fact that you're catching feels for someone, or when you actually wanted to be friends, but then realize that you're falling in love with this person, right? Like that ends up becoming a waxing situation, because at the end of the day, human beings do have needs, and them neglecting them, compartmentalizing them, or boxing them up just for the temporary pleasure moment ends up actually becoming really detrimental for the large majority of situationships, because of the fact that there is no boundaries, and both people end up waxing and waning on their boundaries without maybe even ever talking about it. And very few individuals have the self-control, the self-discipline, and the self-development to be a extremely conscious and mature person that is entering into a situationship. It's very different when you have two people who have both gone to therapy, both understand their patterns, both understand their tendencies, who outright know what their quote unquote trauma imprints are. They're coming in, they're completely transparent, they're sharing their boundaries, they're not wavering on those, they're completely mature, and they know that as a result of our neurochemistry, when you start engaging for more than XYZ amount of times, given that person's situation, then you're going to start developing feelings and making a conscious commitment with one another explicitly that after we have slept with each other, let's say, for example, after 2 times, we start to notice that feeling that feels really good, not just in the moment, but you feel that sense of like camaraderie, or you have this companionship feeling, and we're starting to kind of fill in the gaps of actually going out and developing real levels of intimacy with a partner, working on the foundations that would help us do that. Like the odds and the chances of people entering into that type of situationship is very small and very little. And so this is why situationships, while initially they might be really great for exploration and for developing some skills, they end up becoming this absolute disaster and train wreck that ends up traumatizing people from intimacy, from commitment, from any sort of relationship. And that is more often the case than ever. And now we're seeing a generation than we've ever seen that is less committed, less committal by default than ever before, because the normalization of situations like situationships and the fact that it is now like kind of a culture and something that is like he. You add that we're supposed to be friends, but now we're engaging on a romantic or sexual level and no one really knows about it, but people kind of know about it. It's like this level of secrecy. So it ends up actually spinning out a lot of really unhealthy relational dynamics, emotional distress. And unfortunately, what I've seen for a lot of people that get sucked into the pattern of situationships is they never actually develop the really healthy skill sets that being in a more defined relationship actually requires. So you don't actually go through the full kind of series and cycle of what it means to be in a relationship. So your mindset around relationships, around intimacy, around emotional engagement, about self-worth gets totally messed up, because while you think you know this person, your mind's kind of playing tricks on you because those needs are still present. So it's a whole thing. It really is.
Not all of them end up in turmoil, but a lot of them do, because at like one person ends up wanting the relationship to pursue and the other one doesn't, but they don't want to lose it because they don't want to lose the person, so they end up betraying themselves and their own needs and staying in it way longer than they should, and it ends up just being a really destructive dynamic. And a lot of the times, what ends up happening is someone enters into this type of dynamic because they're very avoidant and they're commitment phobic or whatever, or they've had trauma and they don't want to have to commit to somebody, but they'll do everything that looks like a commitment. But when it comes time to actually make commitment like behaviors, oh, well, this isn't a real relationship. This is a situationship and you should have known that. So
Right. Yeah.
there's
It's
very
very
few
destructive.
instances. It's extremely destructive. I mean, would you agree? And I'm genuinely asking. I'm not saying this because I believe with certainty that it's real, but do you believe that it's true that there's very few situationships that actually end up being healthy? And do you believe that it's even worth pursuing it? Because from what I've seen, I mean, there's very few. I've yet to see a healthy situationship. You said that you have, and that's wonderful. And those people probably have extremely high emotional intelligence and
Yes.
very high self-worth, and they're very mentally and emotionally regulated in a way that most people are not. So like, what are the downsides? What do people need to be mindful of?
Yeah. So one of the things that I want to say to that last point is the fact that like a situationship, it's always a transient state. So it's never just like this thing that like is fixed. You're usually either someone who is like friends, or you kind of know each other, or you know each other through the grapevine, and then you kind of open up the doors through like friends with benefits, and then it starts to kind of get all muddled because there's not a lot of communication going on, because why would you, right? You're maybe not necessarily in that state of committal. So the situationship is the stop between that destruction or going back to quote unquote friends. It's never like the end all be all, because large majority of individuals want a long-term committed relationship. Whether or not they're sharing that with their situationship is a whole nother story. And I think it's important also to note that in the US specifically, I believe it's something along 60% have actually said that they've been in a situationship at one point or another. When you actually kind of look at their people's relationship history, they can say that they've been in a situationship. And whether or not, if I don't have the stats on this, but whether or not that was mutually consenting, whether or not that was everyone was on the same page, right? What are the stats on that? I believe it would be very small. And of that situationship percentage, how many people, I would love to see the statistics, how many people actually experienced relationship trauma as a byproduct of the misconception of what a situationship is actually good for and can actually be good for so long. And I can even sit in that. I've been in that camp. I've been in a situationship. I didn't know it at the time. And oftentimes you don't know it at the time. Yeah. But the aftermath is where it can be really damaging. And that's why we want to talk about this, because at the end of the day, a situationship, like I said at the very beginning, it's okay that you're in one, right? Like there's nothing bad or wrong with it itself. It's about, if you don't know yourself to where you know exactly the point in the line, and you have the discernment, the discipline, and the self-worth to do something immediately when that ping hits. And when that line is drawn in the sand to where I need to do something different, I need to get out of this, I need to stop this, I need to end this, I need to move on and move forward, or stop and process this and maybe go into a relationship, quote unquote, with myself, until I really start to actually honor the fact that I want a deeply meaningful long-term relationship, right?
I had a client who, and we're still working together.
Mm-hmm.
She was in a relationship with someone for many years. They broke up. They continued hooking up after they broke up. And once they like officially ended it off, when he moved away, she had a really hard time being alone. So she just jumped into another situationship relationship. And she and I were talking, and we were saying, this is becoming really destructive for you because you want your needs met, but you want a long-term relationship, and you know that you don't like this person. But even though she didn't like him, and even though she was explicitly saying to him, well, I don't know where I am, and I don't know what I want yet, and blah, 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 he had very deep feelings for her. But because she has a severely anxious attachment, she wouldn't end it until he did.
Yeah.
This is where situationships become extremely damaging. And this is exactly what I said to her. If you're going to enter into something, you have to know with 100% certainty that you can get out of it.
Yeah.
And that you're going to keep yourself safe, and that you're not going to make long-term detrimental consequences and impacts on your life because you just want to be loved, but you don't want somebody yet because you want a long-term relationship, but you know these people can't give it to you.
And a lot of people really desire that freedom element. So like, and why that desire is there in the first place is warrant for conversation, because is it the desire to become more independent because you kind of just got out of a really controlling relationship? Do you have a history of people trying to abuse or control or manipulate or gaslight you? Like, or are you trying to avoid relationship expectations of mutuality? And I think that that's very fascinating when we really do look at some of those things, because Bianca, that client, it's like one of the things that situationships unfortunately have started to fill a huge gap with, that is so, from my perspective, when you really start to look at the behind the scenes impact, is so detrimental, is so many people fear being alone and loneliness. And so situations, yeah, it's really bad. It's an epidemic. We've done an episode on that. But, and situationships have started to fill a big gap in that quote unquote loneliness pandemic, especially for younger generations. And now that's quote unquote, like I said, become the normal, because it's better to quote unquote, and this is in people's minds that are in situationships, it's better to be in a situationship and have someone who I kind of have this like really light level of consistency or engagement with, even if it's toxic as hell, abusive, controlling, manipulative, it's unclear, right? Like all these things. Just because one need is getting met, that's still okay, because feeling alone or feeling a sense of loneliness is really scary. And then that has me looking square in the face of the work that I'm not doing, which is I'm not actually working on myself to develop the relational skill sets that are going to attract my dream partner. So it literally fills this gap. And honestly, from my perspective, it creates an even bigger gap between what people are telling themselves that they want in a relationship versus what their actions are getting addicted to, which is that having a quote unquote sense of a relationship or a resemblance of that.
And the story they're telling themselves about their readiness for a relationship, and the story they're telling themselves about who they are. To the episode that we did about understanding trauma responses you mistake for personality, this client verbatim said, I'm at X age, I'm ready to be a wife. Like, I've already hit all of the milestones. This is the last one. And she's so convinced that now is the time to actually get into a relationship, and she's ready, and she knows she's ready, but she's avoiding so much. There's so much she hasn't worked on, and she's convincing herself of this narrative, and yet she cannot be alone. We are terrified of being alone. So we're entering into these really destructive dynamics, convincing ourselves of a narrative that, oh, it's just short term and it's fine. And there's nothing bad that's going to happen. And I'm in control. I can get out of it. And the truth is, you're damaging your future and you're damaging yourself by staying in this.
Yeah, I remember. So there was this one guy that I was in a situationship with, and then we started to try dating, because what I learned afterwards was he started to catch feelings. And of course we're going to catch feelings like that. Like, how can you?
Because you're hot shit.
Oh, aside from that, thank you. And also just like in general, again, back to our biochemistry, like let's understand we were animals before we became quote unquote Homo sapiens, right? Like those animalistic parts of us are there and our needs are not going anywhere. You can suppress them all you want. They're going to beg for you to get them met no matter what you do and don't do. And I remember being in the situationship was just in that initial phase, it was more physical and more intimate, not romantic, not emotional. And really that was because of me. I was in this avoidant stage, not interested in any emotional connection. I didn't trust men at that point in time. And I actually did this, and I'm not super proud of this, but I was in this phase where I was so hurt as a result of my other relationships. I told myself and convinced myself of this narrative. Well, if guys are so quick to move on and to just totally destroy people's lives, then let me go ahead and try out this quote unquote not trying to catch feels thing and just strictly engaging on this physical level. Big warning sign, do not do that. That is so unfair and so unhealthy of a narrative to convince yourself of when you are a feeling creature. And I find actually when I share that story, so many people are like, damn, I tried that too and did not result well. But when he started to kind of move the needle into like, let's go on actual like formalized dates, I recognize inside of me that he wants to get more formal about this instead of more of a casual relationship. And I wasn't interested. And I very well could have kept that quote unquote going. And as a matter of fact, I know lots of women who would have gotten a meal out of that or would have really been not so great in that moment, where letting that person believe that if I show up for this date because I'm getting certain needs met, then it'll be fine. A lot of us won't actually have the courage to check in with our own feelings and be honest with them, and also be conscientious of the heartbeat on the other side. And I remember having a moment with myself. We had gone on the first date and I was like, okay, I'm kind of trying to explore this because I could be kind of open to this. We had gone on our first date and I was just like, I can't, like, this is something that I'm not interested in and I don't want, and I'm not ready for this. And my thought process was, I don't want to hurt you more than whatever right now I have contributed to, because whether me showing up for this date or me continuing things, I know that's going to have an impact on you. And so many of us, when we go from a situationship or to casual dating or to dating multiple people or whatever it is, I often find that we are in this quote unquote me loop. And that is where the damaging parts can really start to come in, because in an actual committed long-term relationship that does have a label, there is what I referred to earlier as mutuality, meaning that you are trying to be conscientious of the other person's heart on the other side. When you're in a situationship, it is far less about the heart on the other side and what your actions are saying and doing to the other person, that it's very just me selfish focused. And I know there's so many people that as a result of that quote unquote me loop, that situationships allow you to stay in unless someone mature says, hey, let's actually talk about what we're going through. The unclear expectations, there's difficulty moving on because it takes a huge emotional toll on you. On top of that, you might actually end up with someone who's actually really abusive and controlling. Like there's just that uncertainty. We have a need for certainty as human beings, and we have a need for consistency. Well, you might be saying, well, it was consistently great sex, or it was consistently casual, or it was consistently breadcrumbs. It's like, what have we come to? You don't need a full-blown label, but damn, don't accept breadcrumbs when you're someone that's also told me that you want a long-term committed relationship. Have your words and have your actions match, and recognize that there's a heartbeat on the other side.
100%. You know what a lot of people would do if they're in your situation too? Like that situation that you just expressed. And I've heard so many people say this. They'll have a moment like that where it's like, okay, let's see. And they try it, and someone like you says, honestly, I'm not feeling this. What a lot of people will then do is they'll say, but let's go back to the way we were, even though I know you have feelings for me. And it's fine, we'll figure it out. And the other person, because they want that person so badly, they'll just say, okay.
Yeah,
and then it ends up being a horrible dynamic because you're getting all your needs met. It's fine and dandy. Nothing's happening to you, but you know that this other person wants more. Yeah. And so you want the perks, and you don't want to have to acknowledge your behavior and the impact your behavior is having on this other person, because you know that that person has feelings and they're probably not going to step away. And that's manipulation. You're not maybe intending on that, but that is abusive, and that's manipulative, and that's extremely selfish. And a lot of people are ending up in dynamics just like that. And we're not here to bash anybody. Like, if you do not have the capacity for a relationship, okay. If you want something casual, okay. But a lot of people don't like this, but you can either write it down, or you need to have a verbal agreement and or a contract with this person, being
that you consistently check in on.
100% being very, very abundantly clear that this is what I am okay with, this is what I'm not okay with. Here's how we'll know if lines are getting blurred, and here's what we are going to do in response if that happens. How many people have actually done that? Literally none. I doubt anyone has actually ever done that when they're entering into a situationship, because we all think we have more control than we actually do. So it's like, no, it's fine. We'll figure it out. I'll just walk away. And then 6 months later, you're still doing the same thing over and over again. And the dynamic is just persisting. So, final question for you as we start to wrap up. If somebody is in this dynamic, what are a couple of things that they can point to know if this is actually healthy and constructive for them, or if this is damaging? And if it is damaging, what should they do?
Yeah. Okay. So number one, the first thing is being real. So I want you from here on out to declare that you will no longer lie to yourself. Lying to yourself will only kill you slowly. So make that commitment to yourself, number one, because everything that proceeds afterwards is contingent upon that. I will no longer lie to myself, regardless of how hurtful or how painful it might be to look in the mirror of me telling myself the truth about what is next to come. So important. Okay. From there, I want you to reevaluate the fact that you are an animalistic human that feels, and recognizing that you have needs, and you have a need for consistency. And I want you to check in if after every single interaction that you have with your situationship partner or whatever, you find yourself wanting more consistency or wanting a little bit more of whatever it is that you're currently tolerating, accepting, etc. Recognize that level of consistency that you're getting versus what you need, not what you want, but what you need, is off. And if you're in that situation, for example, you start to make plans or open up your calendar a little bit more for your situationship. Oh, you just so happen to stop having friends or plans with your friends or with your family on a Friday or Saturday night. But then you check in and your situationship partner is like, oh, well, I'm actually traveling, and didn't even have a thought come forward to try to also open up their calendar for you. And that was a mutual thing. Recognize that is a huge lack of reciprocity. And the second thing is recognize that you're an option, not a priority. And the first thing that I said just connected to the second thing. You're an option, not a priority. And that is a really difficult truth to accept because of the fact that you are engaging at the level that you currently are. And if your need for consistency is not being met, this second thing needs to be rung true. And what do you do in that situation when you really look that cold hard truth in the mirror that you're an option, not a priority? Is check in. Are you okay with that? Are you okay being an option in someone's life versus a priority? Because for me, I remember recognizing and telling myself, I actually wasn't okay with that. I'm not interested in being an option. And what I really want deep down is to be the number one priority. And that is now where I'm at, because I was real and honest with myself at the fact that I should never be an option. Okay. So that's number two. And then number three is when you can own those first two things, recognizing that the future is bright and you don't just live in the now. If there's a lack of future movement, or if there's a lack of labeling, there's a lack of planning, there's a lack of definition, and you find yourself catching that you want definition, you want a little bit more, or you want a little bit of less. This lack of is a representation of what's being avoided in the other person and what you're avoiding within yourself. The lack of future planning showcases where all the work for you is, the individual one-on-one work that helps you recognize that you are actually damaging yourself by being in a situationship more than you ever want to admit. And so what do you do about that? You send us a DM and you say, hey, I'm in a situationship that I recognize all those 3 things that you guys just said. It's resonating really hard. And I don't want to leave. I'm struggling to leave. I'm terrified of being alone. And just own that. When you send someone who's been there, who's done that, who understands how difficult it is and the emotional turmoil that it takes, and you DM them and you say, I need support, that doesn't mean that you're going to need to change immediately. And it doesn't mean that change is going to be extremely overwhelming, painful at the beginning. Change needs to happen that is subtle, because what we're seeing is that you're in a situationship because of something. No one wakes up out and starts to develop their entire thesis of relationships and says, you know what? I want to be in and out of situationships my entire life. I haven't met one person. What is the contrary to that is every single person that I've talked to that's been in serious relationship, that's been in and out of situationships, that's been casual sex, casual dating, all this, every single person wants a long-term love. Every single person. I have not met anyone that contradicts that. Now, do you have the courage to begin to take the first step to admitting that which is so wholly true within inside of you? That is the question that I invite you on the quest, because the journey is so freaking worth it. And I'm on the other side of that with the love of my life who has me as the number one priority. And it is fucking so powerful. So I hope that for you, because trust me, you're likely tolerating way less than you deserve.
You also have Alan. No, I'm just kidding.
That's what I mean. My honey.
No, you missed the joke.
Oh, I see. I see what you did there.
You killed it. That's it. It died.
Oh,
okay. That was a wonderful point, though.
Okay. All right. Well, with that being said, on a less serious note, the episode suggestion that I have for you, dear listener, who just totally ran, is 369. How your attachment is preventing you from love. I didn't realize it at the time and I didn't want to accept it, but learning about my attachment style certainly helped me understand why I was tolerating a situationship and why I was navigating relationship dynamics the way in which I was. And it came down to my avoidant ass attachment style. So you can work on that. You can become secure, but you got to put in the work. Bianca?
Facts. 424, is it really better to be in a bad relationship than to be lonely? Most of us enter into these dynamics because we're afraid of being alone and we'd rather have somebody than have to deal with the solitude. And that episode really dives into what you're leaving on the table by doing that. And as someone who has been single by choice for a pretty decent amount of time now, I'm here to tell you it is so much better being alone. I would love a relationship. I am a wife of a person. I am someone who thrives in a relationship, a good one. And I'm not willing to settle on that. I did for so many years and it impacted me so badly. And now I've been single for a while and I wouldn't trade it for a shitty relationship, because you learn to be okay being alone and you learn ways to get those needs met. So if you want to learn that, if you want to understand how to do that for you, please send us a DM, reach out. All jokes will be involved. And we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.